Hi. I've noticed that often one of the hardest things about oil paintings is starting. If you come from an acrylics background with the very fast drying times of acrylic, you tend to be very careful about where you put your marks because it's often difficult to actually erase those marks effectively with acrylics, because they, in my experience, which is limited, they tend to be overly transparent. If you put a dark colour on, like a black or a dark colour of some sort, it's often quite difficult to actually erase that mark. Now, the difference between acrylics and oil paint is that oil paint is extremely easy to remove. Because of its long drying times, relatively long drying times, you can quite easily just get a rag and wipe away your marks. What that means is that you can be much more relaxed with your oil painting because you know that you can fix things up quite easily. So people coming from acrylics tend to be a bit hesitant about making marks, about starting a painting. And also I've noticed that high achievers have this problem, because high achievers tend to really hate making mistakes. The thing about oil painting is you can make many mistakes and it's so easy to actually fix up mistakes. So it's a totally different mindset from acrylic painting and if you are a high achiever. Well, here's an image that I've decided I want to paint, and you'll see my approach to actually painting it. As you can see, I've got it upside down, or perhaps you can't see it because it's quite dark. But I've got it upside down because definitely with portraits, I find it a lot easier to actually see all the various shapes that I want to paint when I'm not looking at it as a face. So when it's upside down, you can't clearly see the relationships that make it in your brain a face. We obviously know it is a face, but you can more clearly see all the shapes that go up to making that face. And this helps tremendously when you're trying to lay out your picture. But getting back to this issue about high achievers and people who paint in acrylics, I want to demonstrate what you can do. So I could be quite slapdash. I might do something over here to define that chin, and I might go down here and think, well, you know, it's going to be something like that. But then I decide, no, that's totally wrong. I can easily remove that line. Okay, it's still slightly there, but at the end of the day, this is going to be totally covered in paint and you're not going to see that line there. So I can come back and say, okay, well, I think that shape is roughly there. And I think there's this oval shape here and it's going to come over here slightly and around here. So what I'm trying to demonstrate is you can be totally free and easy in the way you approach your painting, because whatever you do, if it's wrong, you can erase it. And yes, it's going to stain the board, but that's not going to be an issue later on. If you really want to get rid of that paint totally, then you just dig it a bit deeper, you get a clean cloth, and you can virtually totally remove all those marks. But when I do erasure, all I want to do is to remove the blobs of paint. I don't care if there's a smear on the board. So the point I'm trying to make is be relaxed. Put on some music. Take it easy. You're supposed to be enjoying yourself. Don't be uptight, because at the end of the day, all these strokes are going to totally disappear as you progress with your picture. And you can erase everything. If you put an eye in the wrong spot, you can rub it out. So you have that confidence that you can fix up absolutely everything, whereas with acrylics it's much more difficult. So when you start your painting, I want you to approach it with the confidence that you can fix up every single problem. You don't have to sweat about it. It's going to be good in the end. Let me start to be serious about this painting. So perhaps you can't see, but I've actually got some pencil lines around here. So this painting area is A2 in size. That's A4, this is A2. And the relationship between A4 and A2 is that A2 is exactly four times the area of A4. And what that means is that you can just double any distance on the A4, you double it, and you will find the corresponding point on the A2. So what you can do, you can get a pair of calipers, and I hope you can see these points on this dark A4 image. But I can measure from the edge of the A4 to, say, the corner of that eye, and from the corresponding edge, which is where this margin is, inwards, I can just double that, and the corresponding position of the corner of that eye is going to be a line along there. And this is quite remarkable because it shows you how your eye is deceiving you, because I know that that position is going to be somewhere along there, and to my eye that seems to be way over to the other edge of the board, but that is exactly where it needs to be. So obviously with any point that you're trying to find the position of, you need to get two references. So I'm getting a reference from the top and from the left hand edge. I'm using a massive brush, but that's okay. And in fact you should use the biggest brush that you can get away with, but perhaps you want to go to a smaller brush. So going to a smaller brush just for these measurements, we know that the corner of that eye is there. So you can then find out the corresponding positions of any other of these shapes. So the other corner of the other eye is along there somewhere, and the other coordinate is going to be there. And if you look at these two eyes, you can see that there is some kind of slope, and that's corresponding with this slope over here. So we can do that with a number of points. And once again, if you get it wrong, you can rub it out. You can decide, hey, I'm not being accurate enough. So let's do that again. Get that position. And it's going to be there. And there. So those are those two positions of the corners of those eyes. Now once you've got some absolute positions that you've got, you can then do things like measure within the drawing, within the image. So the width of that eye is that. So the width of that eye is to there. So that eye looks surprisingly a long way over there, but that's exactly where it is. So I know that that eye is going to be fitting in there somewhere. I'm not doing a precise definition of that eye because this is early days yet. And same thing with this eye. I know that this eye is going to extend roughly there, and it's something like that. So that tells you that this line that I've drawn over here is way off. It's way off because the hairline actually crosses over the eye. So that hairline is much more like this. And what you should be doing is looking at the various shapes on the image. Now the hairline is some way away from that eye, so it comes around like this. So we're coming around like this, and then like this, and then it goes off at an angle to the chin. And look, I'm using the broadest possible lines. And doing that, it gives you the flexibility to move around. I'm not locked into any particular position on this thick line. I know that this line is somewhere in there. And so what you do is, when you're starting to paint, is you're working with all these big shapes, and you gradually refine as you continue with the painting. So you can look at the negative shapes to see if you're getting it right. There's this shape over here, which is all dark, and there's a shape and there's a shape over here, which is actually some kind of veil that's going over here. So this is all very coarse. This is not probably what a lot of high achiever type people want to do. They probably want to do some precision work, but painting is an iterative process. Certainly the way I paint is an iterative process. When it's top down, you go from big shapes not particularly well defined, and gradually tighten up and tighten up and tighten up. And that gives you the opportunity to be changing things as you need. So what I'm doing now is looking at the relationships to all these various shapes. That veil, I hope you can see that it's very dark, is crossing the outside of the picture around about there, and it comes down and goes around here like this and exits around there. So this is all very vague, and that's fine. So I want to get a couple more points. I want to actually determine how accurate my chin position is, because I have a tendency to make big chins. And in fact, the chin is much more like over here. And I want to get the position of the bottom of that mouth, because these are all very important positions. And the bottom of that mouth is here. And then there's that lower lip, and then there's a smaller upper lip. Now be very aware about the way this head is tilting, because already even though I'm looking at it upside down, I'm tending to move that mouth around as if it was horizontal. So you have to be aware of what your brain is doing, because it does tend to try and rationalize, and you really want to switch off that rationalizing process. So the mouth is approximately there. You look at the relationships, and I know that's not quite right, but at this stage I don't really care too much, because this is the very first bit of marking up. So I know the tip of that nose is there somewhere, and the nose is slightly in from the mouth. It's something like this. I think this lady is Japanese. She's got quite refined features. And then the shadow, and the shadow, and then here there's an eyebrow somewhere there, and there's an eyebrow somewhere there, and all of this is in shadow and around here, and there's a shadow here from the nose, and there's shadow around here. So it's all very general. So what we'll do now, just for the hell of it, just to see how we're going, is to briefly turn it the other way to see how it's looking. And of course you're probably going to say, hey, that looks nothing like that image. But we do have, what we've achieved now is we know exactly where that chin is. We know where the bottom of that nose is. We know the eyes are there. They're the wrong shape, but we know they're there. And we know that basically all these major shapes are in the right spot. It looks terrible. it's going to become fantastic. We just need to have the faith that we can achieve what we're trying to achieve. So I'm now going to turn it around the other way, and we'll start doing some painting these major shapes. Now, as usual, I'm using one mark paints exclusively, and I'm painting very thinly. Now I don't want to lose sight of those lines just yet, but eventually we'll go all the way to the margin. But right now, I still want to keep those lines there because they're the points from which I'm doing measurements. So what I'm doing, I'm looking at the picture, I'm laying on very thin paint. I'm not too concerned about the exact colour, I just know this is very, very dark. And I'm painting very thinly. So we're just blocking in. I'm looking at the shapes, we're blocking in these shapes. There's a patch of darkness which is her hair and shadow, and it comes around here and goes round here. It's approximately this shape. So what I've been trying to demonstrate here is how slapdash, apparently slapdash you can be and get a good result. Now I'm not being slapdash, I'm roughly painting out these various shapes, and if things go wrong, as I said before, you can just rub them out. You can't do this with acrylics, certainly not easily. And I can thin the paint out a little bit where I think it's too dark, and maybe I just want to put some tone with the dirty rag where it needs to be. So what we're having here is a slow build up of ultimately what it's going to look like. there we are. That's it. This is what we're going to be running with. So we've been working on the big shapes. We were working on them upside down because I could see the shapes better that way. But at some point you will want to turn it around and see it as a face. So what we do now is to refine those shapes even further. You may find at this stage that no, you're not happy with where those shapes are. For example, looking at that neck, I know this darkness needs to extend a little bit further. So you can quite easily make minor adjustments. You can use your rag to sort things out. Even though the paint is extremely thin, I could make it even thinner. If you look at this veil, there's a light source coming from the top there somewhere. So I can just scrape off a bit of the paint a little bit more to more clearly define those lines. And there's a line there and it comes down here and around here and over there, and you can actually see things taking shape by doing that. So at this stage you can, once again, you can still be working with the biggest brush possible. I want to just define the shadow over that eye, and it's coming down past the side of the nose, and then there's a shadow coming from the nose that joins this shadow over here, which is quite strong, and comes around to the eye. So we haven't been concentrating on an eye or a mouth or a nose or anything. We're just looking at the masses of colour, and this is what you should be doing. Right, so in this picture there's very strong light on the middle of the nose. There's strong light under the nose. There's a bit of strong light, fairly strong light on the chin. There's a patch of fairly strong light on that cheek. Everything else is in darkness. It's a very dark picture. And the attraction to me of this picture is the fact that it's so dark that all these features in the middle are really showing quite strongly. And we can make it even more dramatic by putting these little highlights on the eyes and a touch of highlight on the lip. So let's see if it's going to be a successful picture. So far all we've done is use Mars Black, Montmartre Mars Black and Montmartre Cerulean Blue. There's a bit of blueness in the background there. There's a grey blueness in this veil, and that's about it. And so that's where I put in all the blueness. At this stage we could probably get rid of that. I'm fairly confident now of the relationship of all these shapes. We don't need that margin anymore. That was just for the measuring up process. So let's utilise the whole board. I mean, of course you could cut down the board to the shape that you wanted. Cutting MDF is very easy, but I prefer to extend the picture out where it makes sense. Extend the picture out to the edge. So I'll do that. Now you can see that this process of getting to this stage can be very quick. You're not doing any detail work. You're using a massive 1-inch brush. You're painting great big shapes. There's nothing time consuming about any of this. So there we have an approximation of what we're looking for. Now at this stage I do want to start doing some more detail, so I will move to a smaller brush. And because I'm working on the face and essentially there's no blue on the face, I'm now using Mars Black and the Montmartre Brilliant Red to get in these details. So now I want to refine these shapes a bit more. This forehead area that I've done looks to me to be a lot broader than the actual shape of the forehead. So I'm guessing, and guessing is a perfectly valid way of doing things. I'm guessing I need to bring that in more. This hairline, or I can't really make out what it is, I think it might be hair, is just touching the corner of the eye, so it needs to be substantially in over here. And I can go back to the big brush and just extend that over there a bit more. So you say to yourself, is that shape the same as that shape over there? And if you're happy that it is, you carry on. I mean, further down the line you might decide, no, I made a mistake there, it's not that shape really. And then you can do modifications. Like now I've moved that in, this dark shadow needs to be somewhat smaller. And once again I'm guessing, I'm looking over here, I'm looking back, and now I'm doing sgraffito. I'm just scraping a line into where I think it needs to be. And you can use your finger to rub things out. And I decided that needs to be more like this. Just to make sure that this forehead is the right shape. So I was saying I'm now using Brilliant Red mixed with Mars Black, and I know that eyebrow, to make this shape, the eyebrow is roughly there, and the other eyebrow, this face is slightly tilted over, the other eyebrow is here. And I know that all I know about this eye is those corner points. Those are the ones I measured. Now look at the gap between that eyebrow and that eye, and it's obvious now that that eyebrow is too low. So the eyebrow is more up here, because there's quite a big gap between the eyebrow and the eye. So the eye is going to be something like that. I'm looking at the shape, it's an almond shape. It's almost straight along the bottom. The pupil is almost full. She's staring out of the darkness. So let's look over here. The eye is something like that. And I'm still approximating. I think it's somewhere like that. This eye is distinctly lower than that one. She's got a distinct bag under there. You can't really see a bag over there. She is staring out. And once again, that eyebrow needs to be up further, because there's a bigger gap. There's a bigger gap above the eye. And I haven't done the upper lid. So when I do the upper lid, there's the eye, there's the upper lid. The eyebrow is up here. That eyebrow is up here. Look at the shape here. Look at the shape of that forehead. Maybe that needs to be a little bit higher, that point. Like so. So you look at the relationships. You look at the relationships of all these shapes. Look at that angle between the corner of the eye and the outside of the nose. So we know the outside of the nose is somewhere here. We know, because we measured it, that the centre of the nose is there. Look at the outside of that nose in relation to the eye. We know it's somewhere there. We know there's some shadow that's coming down there. And then this mouth. Now we didn't measure the edge of the mouth, but I know that in relation to the eye, the corner of the mouth is approximately there. The corner of the mouth, the other corner is there. And she's got a kind of almost a Mona Lisa type look to her lips. She has a half smile. And the centre of the mouth is centred with the nose all the way up. So the centre of the mouth is centred with the nose all the way up. This eyebrow is too far over. The eyebrow is going to be there. Her upper lip is thinner than her bottom lip. She's got a strong bit of shadow underneath. So we're getting a feel for what this painting is going to look like. there's quite a broad sweep of darkness here. The top of her nose appears to be quite narrow with the shading. And on the other side, this is all in darkness. And she's got a straight line. She's got a Japanese nose. Many Japanese have this fairly long looking narrow nose. It's a characteristic. Which is I think she's Japanese. So effectively I'm sketching with this brush. And now I think maybe I've made that chin, maybe it's too long. And you may find that you've been totally wrong in all your measurements. So you look at the distance of these various shapes, and that chin comes around, and look at the distance between there, and it comes around here, and then she's got quite a strong shadow under that chin. She's got quite a round looking face down here, and then it disappears off into this darkness, and this hair is actually coming way out here. So you're getting a feel for what this is going to look like. Now I've just been using the brilliant red and the Mars black. So now to get some more definition, and just for the hell of it, I might introduce some titanium white, because I want to really get a feel for what these shapes look like. And this titanium white, it's got a lot of black on the brush, which isn't going to be so obvious here, but in fact that is a shade of grey. So this black over here is going to be a component of that grey, because grey, as we know, is black and white. So we know that. So I'm looking at this shape here, and we know it's something like this, and it's extending around here, and then there's a bit of light on that bag, and there's a very small amount of light hitting under there, and there's some lightness on this side of the nose, and there's lightness here, and there's very strong light here, and there's strong light here. Now all this paint is going to disappear. As we move everything around, all this paint is going to just totally disappear. And at this stage, I'm using my finger to smear the paint around. So I know that there's an area of light over here, and I'm just going to blend it all in because I don't want these paint strokes. If I'm going to have some paint strokes show, I actually add them at the very end of the picture. I don't like them earlier on. I like to have paint strokes totally under my control. So it's all relatively dark over here. And these lips, I'll just roughly put them in. It's going to be a lot darker than that. So once again, we're just using those four colours. One thing I haven't done, which I will do, the Zorn palette consists of four colours. So far we've used three. We've used the Mars Black, we've used the Brilliant Red, we've used the Titanium White. So and I did use Cerulean Blue, which is not strictly in the Zorn palette, but for this painting we definitely need it. So the Zorn palette also includes yellow ochre. And this lady has got a fair amount of yellow ochre. That neck, it's ready, seems to be ready, and but also yellow ochre. So right now that looks very yellow. Don't worry about it, it's going to change. Has she got some yellow ochre in her flesh? Yes, I think so. So let's add some yellow ochre to these colours. Okay, so we've been still roughing stuff out, but we're defining the shapes more and more, and it's approaching more and more to the final picture. But of course we've got a hell of a long way to go. Now the whites of these eyes are nothing like white. There's very little in the way of white except for the highlights. So what I'm going to do is just refine these shapes, darken up these shadows. So the shadow now has brilliant red, touch of yellow ochre, only the smallest touch. And you can see I'm doing brush strokes that are very random. I'm not trying to be clever about the brush strokes, and then I'm just kind of blending it all in with my fingers. So there's some darkness around there, above that eye. There's darkness under that eye. It's all dark. And that darkness extends around here. And it distinctly, the light, the shadow distinctly moves down in a line here. So how good your painting ends up will be determined by how you see the source image. If you can pick up every tiny little nuance of colour and shape and put it onto your painting, it's going to look so much better. So now it's just a process of refinement. So this colour here is basically yellow ochre and brilliant red. Obviously with some white and maybe a touch of black, but predominantly yellow ochre and brilliant red. So we have this very light patch in the middle, and then we have this transition zone, which is a light browny sort of colour, which is a kind of light brown sort of colour, which, as I said, is yellow ochre and brilliant red. There's a bit on the side there. There tends to be a bit of reflected light on the bottom. Obviously these transitions need to be refined more. They're not as stark as I've done them. Now the bottom of this eye, there is very little to no black. So where it meets the pupil, it's quite pale. And then beneath that we have the bag. This area is quite pale. It's quite dark, sorry. Right, at this stage I'm trying to get a little bit more, texture into the skin. This lady's got some very fine, I think she's wearing some pale makeup, or possibly she's very, very white, as some Japanese are. But I'm trying to get that feeling of texture on her skin, so I'm just doing small little random brush strokes to try and get a feeling for all these small pores that she does have on her skin. And I want to get this transition from the dark to the light a little bit better. So I'm just kind of randomly dabbing, just trying to make the tones, the tonal variation even, because she's got very blemish-free skin overall. So I'm trying to get these, and I'm dabbing with my finger. I'm trying to get those transitions working a bit better. comes up over here, and then it slightly darker under that bag. And then it goes there like that. There's a bit of white that wraps up round there, and then it joins with the cheek, and there's a bit of whiter flesh over there like this, and that's a bit white. Now this colour up here is slightly different. It's a bit more yellow ochre, so I want to knock back that yellow ochre and get more of this bluey grey feel, especially on that forehead, because it's quite dark there. It's light, but the lightness is relatively, compared to the other areas, is not so light at all. So let's just kind of do lots of dabbing to give the feel that this is skin, and try and make these transitions better. Don't think shadows are monolithic colours, because I can see some slight variation in the depth of that shadow. I think up here it's slightly lighter. So don't ever have monolithic shadows, because that's going to look really boring. Because shadows have texture as well. So this down here, this transitions from quite a light area, which goes up, and it defines the width of that nose. Comes up there and it defines the shape of that nose. So you want to get that in there. The lightest part of that light is along that ridge, and then it kind of transitions off, and then it kind of, there's a slight curvature to show that she's got a half smile there. And then it comes over here, and then it just kind of roughly transitions into that lip. And here it's quite light there, and there's some light on that top of lip, on the edge of the lip, and this is a bit too dark here, so just gently rub in some of that light. And that light kind of transitions onto the lip. There is no really firm, distinctive line separating the lip from the I don't know the technical term for it, but that part of the face between the lip and the nose. So I hope you're seeing that as I'm doing this, it's all getting more and more refined. and the degree to which it gets refined is really up to you as the artist. Some people want to go for ultra realism, ultra definition, and sometimes I do that and sometimes I don't, and so it's all down to you what you want to do. And if you look carefully, there's all these little transitions of colour on that nose. And perhaps this is a bit too pale there. So you might want to knock it back a little bit. There's a bit of shadow, there's a bit of highlight over there that comes around and defines this nostril. So these areas of light, they're not uniform blocks of light. On this chin, the lightest part is towards the top. And you see how I'm doing this stippled effect to give some feeling of the texture of the skin, which you can most clearly, which you can most clearly see along the top there. Now I'm moving down to an extremely fine brush, because I want to put a few highlights in. I mean, this is probably way too early because I've still got a long way to go with this painting. But by putting these highlights in, it actually helps me to define where I need to do some more work. So I want to put this very fine texture of these tiny little pores on her nose that I can see. And even though when you're standing back from this painting, when it's complete, nobody else is going to see them. But they're still going to impart just something extra to the painting. So now I'm just dabbing pure absolutely pure white here. Because I can see what looks to be my eyes to be little specks of absolutely pure white. And some people would say, oh, you know, you're going over the top. But painting is not photography. You're actually creating something new. Unlike photography where you're just copying something else. So I'm getting a much better feel for what still needs to be done with this painting. This area over here is possibly a bit too yellow ochre. There is some faint feel for a very faint light area here, and I'm just kind of blending it in because I now know what the underlying bone structure is like, and I know that if there's any light falling at all in this area, it's going to be on this cheekbone here. So I can put that in from my knowledge of what I've been looking at. Now if you look at this pale area over here, the darkest part of this pale area, if you can look properly, is a T-shaped piece. A bit along there and it goes down to there. So if you do these subtle variations, your picture is going to look so much better. And I'm just doing some scumbling here, and yeah, it's too much. I'm making I'm coarsening her skin, but as you can see, I'm spreading it out. I want to in particular do a bit of light down the bottom there. And you're getting a feel for the shape of the soft flesh of her cheek. Now there's a very sharp dividing line there, and I want to try and get that very sharp dividing line that comes down and these kind of shapes. A bit like this, if I've got clean hands. Now the eyes need some more work. These whites are blue. I need to define those pupils a bit more. But I hope you get the idea of how to approach paintings. Be relaxed. listen to some nice music. You're not going to stuff up. Look, I'm rubbing this off. I can rub this off. Even after all this time, I can make major changes. So be at ease. You can fix up any problems that you come across. So what I'll do is I'm going to have a break and then I'll just carry on, because what I want to do is to make this, as it is in this picture, a pool of interest in a lot of darkness. So I need to work on this darkness over here. I need to work on that neck. This needs to be where you focus on. This is way too light. It's got to be darkened up a lot more, and then I'll have a better idea of what it's looking like. Well, it's the next day. I'm boiling myself a cup of coffee and I'm going to start working on this painting. So this is just 24 hours later and it's bone dry. There's thicker paint there, but even that's dry. It's all dry. I think maybe the white is slightly tacky, but I don't think that's going to be an issue. Oh, and that's highlight there, which I was going to move anyway, is a bit tacky, but everything else is ready to be worked on. So in fact the only colour that is still dry is the areas of white, but as I said, those are the ones I'm going to be working on anyway. Right, the issues I've identified, I feel I've identified, is I think I want to make it like a cobalt blue up here. This blue here is distinctly different to the shawl, and I think that's like a cobalt blue, so I'll use cobalt blue there. Cerulean blue, or a mixture of that and cobalt for the for that shawl. What I like about this picture is this area of shadow that extends all the way up here. So I want to achieve that. I want this area to be glowing the way it is in this photograph, and so I need to darken all around here. That eye needs to be moved down a touch, or maybe just increase in size, because it's also too small. So maybe if I just, and the pupil, the iris, that's a different size. So maybe if I make that bigger, move the bottom edge down, then that's going to fix the problem. Because I think the height is actually pretty good. The height seems to be okay. So maybe it's just a matter of extending that bottom down, increasing the size of that iris. And just generally darken up everywhere else, I think. I cut this picture down from a larger picture where this lady had a candle in front of her and there was this kind of glow. You can just see the glow, like a little kind of rainbow there. So there's some lightness coming from underneath, and I want to see if I can capture that as well, but that's going to be probably some transparent paint at the very end. So maybe using something like liquid to create a transparent layer of paint over the top. I may or may not do that. So that's what I'm going to plan to do, but first I'm going to have a cup of coffee. So I'm adding some cobalt blue to my palette just to get that background in. It looks to be the right sort of colour, so I think I'll just start laying it on. And I need to define the edge of that shawl a bit better. So it's going to be something like that. Well, I had to stop videoing there for a while because a whole bunch of grandkids turned up and it became totally impossible. So I just carried on working away, and I'm close enough to have decided to sign it. So what I'll do now is to stand back for a while, look at it for a couple of days, and then decide if I do want to do any more to it. But I've increased the size of the eye. I think it's looking much more like her original eye. I've tried to darken things up. I've put some darker blue on top, and let's see what it looks like after a while.